this urban environment where there's so many people living in such a condensed area, and there's so many businesses, there's so much waste as well.
Yeah.
And it's funny because earlier when I mentioned to you guys about how each night of the week within Melbourne is a reasonably wealthy city, and because we're in a wealthy country, there's a lot of excess, and people don't know exactly what to do with it because sometimes it's more effort than it's worth, or at least in people's minds, it's more effort than it's worth to actually get someone to come collect it. So it's like, hey, get rid of it. I want to get out of here. It's been a long day. There's other examples of street kitchens just like this one. One of the most famous in Melbourne is called Food Not Bombs, and it operates on the corner of Gertrude and Brunswick, which is a block away from here. Veganism was really big, so getting food that was good but would otherwise be wasted. And because so many of us were doing it, we had so much excess, we go, what can we do with this food? One or two people were already involved in running street kitchens. A number of us were students at RMIT, and we had attended a number of talks on Buddhism. And from those talks, we thought, okay, well, we can try to do something which will benefit others, and we can try to do something which we can make use of all this excess food we're getting, and street kitchens sort of came to mind first, and it started off so slow. We scouted a place our first week, and it got super late, and no one turned up. Because we didn't advertise, we just cooked up and thought, yeah, we'll rock up, and our first year or so, first 2 years in fact, was a real sort of tribute to how hard it is to give away free food, especially once you don't, if you have the momentum behind it and people know you're there, it's easy. But especially early days, like if you were walking down the street and you can put yourself in the position and you saw someone just standing there with a table giving out food, even if the food looks good, the first question you ask is, why is this food being given out? Where's it coming from? What's the agenda? And I guess one of the biggest things now is because of the line, as you guys would have seen, because of the line, people don't even ask that question anymore.
Yeah.
If they know about the street kitchen, they know about it and they'll just jump straight in line. If they're new, it's more like a spectacle. It's like, wow, why are there 60-odd people lining up to get food? Obviously, it's good food. If you've got 60 people waiting there, there's no need to question it, because so it's just that group mentality. But it's sort of, we've changed. We shifted from a model where we used to cook up, and it used to be so much work. You'd start doing pickups at 2:30. Once you completed all that, it'd be about 4. You'd head back to a central location, start cooking up from there. Then you'd head back out, you'd serve, then you'd head back up to wash up, and by the time you finished, it'd be like 11. And that in itself wasn't sustainable. It wasn't sustainable insofar as we couldn't get volunteers to get to the central location to cook. We couldn't get enough people helping out with the pickups because they were very specific. And we couldn't get enough people to help clean up afterwards or even just help serve at the spot. And there was a point where we were looking to put it down at about the 3-year mark. And we posted them out on Gumtree, which is quite useful. As much as it gets flooded with spam and junk, it is still quite useful. And we got a strong response where we had about 6 or 7 people who turned up and said, hey, actually, we want to give this a go. We want to help try and keep this going. And about a year after that, we shifted. We just said, don't cook up at someone's spot, someone's house. Doesn't matter. Let's move away from that model. Let's just base it entirely around food that's being cooked, because it's like, well, why double up? If there's food that's being thrown away, why do we have to get raw goods, cook it, when people are already throwing away perfectly good cooked food? So we shifted entirely to that, and Liz and Stacey, a couple of other volunteers who were of those 7, sort of have really been dedicated to organising more and more pickups. And there was a stage where we had about 15 or 17 pickups that we were collecting from, and that means we could have a lot more volunteers, regardless of location. We could put them in a useful spot. And so then it sort of started to get a bit more popular. It's caught on with the backpackers crowd. Local uni students rock up because obviously they're on a budget. You do have local homeless people, not as many as certain other times in the past, but they still do come through. It's our smallest demographic, ironically, and it's not that street kitchens like this aren't needed, but there are quite a few on offer. The rest of the demographic that turns up often can be a deterrent, because if you rock up midway through the night and you see a line that big and you're really hungry, unless you're really reassured that this food is good and I'm actually going to stand here and wait, you don't. You just wait for the next soup bag and you just pop down there. So there is that on offer, and I don't know how proven that is, but I guess my theory is I can name almost a place you can get a feed at each night around Melbourne, and it's just like, if you've got that choice, even tonight, I know there's another 2 operating. If you have that choice, it's like, well, you can sort of pick and choose. On top of that, you used to diet, so you know where you can get your own food from. But yeah, so that momentum caught on, and that's our current demographic. It's still largest is backpackers, so you meet a huge range of people, and it's interesting because a lot of them are looking for life experiences. A lot of them travel and they've come to see a different country and then they'll move on. So a lot of them are keen to volunteer, but because they're only here for a couple of weeks, a month, they do help out as much as they can at the spot. But one of the key things is getting local volunteers, particularly ones around this area, to sort of make free feed street kitchen embedded in the culture of Collingwood, sort of Fitzroy, because if it's dependent on just 2 or 3 individuals, as soon as they disappear, it falls over. But if you can make it more and more embedded and more spread out and more valued by the community, it will sustain. And I guess that's sort of the aim, because currently we're sort of in a bit of a cushy economic situation, but that can easily turn around. It can easily turn into something like what's happening in Greece at the moment, in areas of the States, in Spain, where you have huge levels of unemployment, where at that point in time, this may be more valuable, even though food might be harder to get at that point. So yeah, it sort of just runs on benevolence, sort of people liking the idea, people wanting community. You have a lot of people who just rock up for the chat, like the like-minded people, and they just have a talk with them. A lot of people like the food. It is good food. It's one of those things where it's like some of the food that people would some of the food that you would eat during the night is something you would pay $15 or $17 for 2 hours earlier, depending on where it came from. Sometimes it was only like $5, but hey. Any specific questions you guys have?
How many people do you have volunteering, like on average?
That's a good question. It's fluctuated. There's a point where it was solidly about 2022. And since then it's bobbed between about 17 or 15 back up to 20, so between 15 and 20, and that's enough for us to cover all our pickups. And I guess it's one of those things where it's like some of the people are in the background, like they might do a pickup, drop it off at, say, local drop-off points, which is a grocer down the road, Sonsas. He lets us use their call-up, which is awesome, because for OH&S issues we need to have those sorts of things. So he lets us do that, and that means they're not here at the spot. They don't get to see how things operate. They act sort of behind the scenes. They know, hey, I'm free at this point in the Arvo. I drop by, pick something up, catch the tram down, drop it off. I get to help out. It's very simple. So between 15 and 20, our highest I think was between 22 and 25. But we're sort of at our natural limit. At this point, I would prefer other street kitchens to be either inspired or started up from a similar basis. And 1 or 2 I have in the city. They're quite young street kitchens, but they operate daily. They're interesting to see. They operate on a similar model where they collect excess food. And it means that we can vouch for them. We can help them out. We can give them our donors' details. But at the same time, it doesn't all fall back on Liz and myself. So it's one of those things. I think if there were smaller sort of networks of street kitchens, that will work a lot better rather than this one just growing.
So if you were interested in volunteering at somewhere like this, how would you recommend going about it?
If for this sort of organisation, or even something like Food Not Bombs, often you just rock up and say, hey, I'm keen to help out, how can I help out? Other sort of organisations who are a little bit more legit, they may actually interview you or ask for your CV. Usually we're just like, well, when are you available? What's your mode of transport? What times can you get to where we need you to get to? Yeah. So we're pretty low-key and laid back like that. Try to include as many people as we can, because I guess it's, as long as people are available, it's a little bit of a pity to not let them take part, because it's like there are areas they can help out with, and often if someone has that urge to really help out with something that's benefiting, even if it's just cultivating a sense of community, you don't want to disallow that person to take part. So usually we try to find something for them to do. Even if it's just like rocking up the spot. You see a number of people now helping out with the cleaning up or the packing up of the tables, and if that's diversified, it means that there's one less thing that Liz and I can sort of shed from our already large load. And at sort of a previous point in time, we had a pinboard which had a map of Melbourne which showed all our donors and whatnot. Because it's like, well, if you're an attendee of the street kitchen, you live in Melbourne, and you had the choice to go somewhere, it's always good to help out the people who are just happy to donate their food, because, I mean, they're giving you the free meal, and obviously there's some degree of benevolence there. Might as well give back to them. So small places like that. Again, Sonsa, the grocers up the road, they're happy to help us use their, let us use their sort of chilling area to store food. Even the ticket inspectors, they know our cars. We put our flyers in the window and they avoid our cars, which is super handy because it's like we didn't even have to initiate that. They just started asking, are these your cars? And we're like, yeah, they are. Yeah, and then they sort of just said, hey, can you print something just so we know? And so we started following that. So yeah, small, sort of unprovoked things do start to happen. People think of it as a nice idea, and it is a nice thing. It is a good thing. Hopefully it's still operating if things get a bit harder, because it's probably going to be more needed. As you can see by the demographic, a lot of them were students, a lot of people are backpackers who don't really need the food. And that's why when certain people rock up, like Dax today, she's been here since 3 or 4 years ago. She rocks up and it's one of those things where it's like, well, if we know we're short on food, are we going to make her stand up the back and wait till there's nothing there? So it's sort of like, I'll try to slip her in the front because she actually needs the food. She's someone who is homeless. She would definitely appreciate it a lot more than someone saying, hey, well, hey, I could have got a meal anywhere else tonight because I do have that money.
Save the money.
Yeah. So yeah, permits we don't have. You probably do need them, but I don't think anyone.
Obviously turns a blind eye.
Yes, yeah, and it's one of those things where it's sort of like, well, it's probably beneficial that they do. It's like one of those things where it's like I feel the same about composting toilets. There's something that's beneficial, but often it's a big thing in a council to have it because of the area, the location. But they're things that I think should be approved. And if I lived out of the country myself, I would probably still have one, even if the council didn't say so. It's just like, well, how would you ship out valuable things that can be composted and used to grow things in with fresh water? You're just wasting multiple resources due to something that's slightly insane. I don't think it's like throwing out the food. It's sort of like, well, why would you get rid of it? So many hungry people, or even so many people who would just value it actually having it.
People used to ask me, like I'm a social worker, people where I used to go for lunch used to say, at the end of the day, we throw all these pies out, can you take them? This was years ago,
Yes,
and I was like, I'd love to, but what can I do with them? So it's really great that there's so many organised things now.
There are.
To actually do that.
There are, and even beyond that, I was explaining earlier on, and this is a little bit gross, but 5 years ago, and maybe it's just because I've moved out of that crowd, uni crowds were really big on dumpster diving. And at that time, Woolies and Coles were...
No, Alice still does that.
Oh, you do? Cool. Woolies and Coles were a lot more liberal with just throwing out anything. But now Second Bite stepped in, and a lot of the Woolies and Coles have that agreement where instead of just throwing that stuff straight into the garbage, they set the better parts of it aside, which means there is that reduction in waste. And then for people like Liz, it's sort of like, hey, it's great, but now my pickings are slimmer. So yeah, it's one of those. It's one of those things. It's great that it's organised, and it's great that there are other organisations set up to collect that sort of thing, and. It is a basis of trust and relationship. It's sort of like, well, those who give the food to us, like you said, they're sort of like, well, if they did make it from scratch, or at least if they prepared it from scratch, it's sort of like, well, hey, I'm not going to sell this, and if it seems awkward me just giving away at my storefront, because then people will click on, hey, if I rock up at this time every day, I can get a free meal. So it helps having that person in between. And I guess that's part of living in an urbanized area. It's sort of like if you were in a small country town, or maybe I'm being idealistic here, but if you actually knew your neighbours, even if they gave you free things, I think you'd still really want to reciprocate, because in order for them to operate, they're dependent on you, and in a way you're dependent on them. In this sort of place where there's so much variety, you're not dependent on them, and they're not dependent on you. Which means that those relationships become a little bit more rare, and I think in a certain sense they're just as valuable, but they're less common.
Thank you.